The U.S. president calling the shots on his tariff regime. Starting next month, dozens of countries could face tariff rates ranging from 10 to 70%. The new threshold comes as negotiations to avoid higher duties enter their final stretch. Donald Trump warning of 10 to 12 letters being sent every day, simply informing trading partners about their tariff rates for imports into the United States.
We've done the final form, and it's basically going to explain what the countries are going to be paying in tariffs. And it's very important. It's a lot of money for the country, but we're giving them a bargain.
Mr. Trump revealing no details on which countries he is targeting, only expressing his preference for what he has called a much easier approach compared to the relative complexity of protracted trade negotiations, with countries needing to nail down specific agreements that generally include multiple clauses. If formalized, the top tier of duties would be higher than what the president had outlined in the Liberation Day rollout early April. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, meanwhile, says he sees about 100 countries only getting the baseline 10% tariff. With under 5 days to go until the deadline of 9th of July, pressure is on to get a deal or face punishing tariffs. Vietnam was the first Asian nation to seal a full pact Wednesday with Washington. The so-called Great Deal of Cooperation grants Hanoi a reduced rate of 20%. That's down from the threatened 46%, plus a 40% tariff on goods originating elsewhere but shipped through Vietnam. This is considered transshipment, while Hanoi gives the U.S. total access to its markets. But lack of clarity over some details remains a concern, as does the impact of Hanoi's compliance on ties with China, generally considered a major source of that transshipment. India reportedly on the cusp of agreement, officials from both sides touting progress, with Mr. Trump himself teasing, quote, a very big deal in the works. Indian manufacturers and exporters keen to avoid a 26% tariff, but the finance chief has stressed that agriculture and dairy products remain, quote, very big red lines. Indonesia hoping for a leg up in negotiations to dial down a possible 32% U.S. levy. It's offered to buy more American aircraft and wheat, as well as near-zero tariffs on key American exports, including agricultural products. The government will also ink a $34 billion pact to invest more in the U.S. and buy more American goods. Thai negotiators have held talks in Washington and are working on a new proposal, while South Korean officials are preparing for discussions, eyeing an extension to the freeze on tariffs at 25%. Thailand is bracing for a 36% levy next week, but says it's still optimistic a deal might be in sight.
การที่ไปเจรจาเนี่ยเราเตรียมข้อมูลต่างๆไว้ตั้งแต่วันแรกที่มีการประกาศเมื่อเดือนมีนาเมษายนถูกไหมครับมันก็ผ่านมาเกือบ2เดือนเราก็มีความเชื่อมั่นครับเวลาคนที่จะเปิดให้ใครไปเจรจาเนี่ยก็ต้องพร้อมถ้าเขาไม่อยากเจรจาไม่อยากคุยเขาก็ไม่เปิดประตูอันเนี้ยเราถือว่าเราเนี่ยได้รับการเปิดประตูจากสหรัฐอันนี้การเข้าไปในห้องและนั่งคุยแสดงท่าทีอย่างความเป็นมิตรที่อยู่กันมาอย่างยาวนานเนี่ยเราก็มีความเชื่อมั่นครับว่าผลการเจรจาจะออกมาดีครับ
Japan's trade envoy on what could be his 8th trip in 11 weeks to Washington this weekend, scrambling to find some common ground. But a deal remains elusive. Mr. Trump has criticized what he described as Tokyo's reluctance to open up more to American rice and car exports, and warned that he is not sure a deal might be made in time. But Tokyo is standing firm, saying it will not sacrifice its farm sector for the sake of reaching an agreement on tariffs. And for more, Toni Waterman joins us live from Washington, D.C. Toni, this threat to send out 10 to 12 letters every day, that's a threat Mr. Trump has made occasionally in the last few weeks. Even as we're hearing these trade negotiations carrying on between Washington and its multiple trade partners, do you see this as a shift in position for Mr. Trump?
Well, this is really a reflection of Trump's frustration with the pace of these trade negotiations, a process that normally takes years and is very, very complex, but one that he believed could be completed in just 90 days. His team, though, has only managed to get the frameworks on 2 of these deals from the UK and also Vietnam, and also a truce with China. But many of the remaining deals have stalled, and that is because they have naturally reached the most difficult stages in the process. So he is essentially issuing this ultimatum, which is on par with his negotiating style. He told reporters that that first batch of around a dozen letters is going to be sent out to U.S. trading partners today. So on Friday, notifying them of what their tariff rate is going to be come August 1st. And he says that those rates are going to range anywhere from 10 to 70%, which, as you mentioned, at that top end of the range would actually be higher than the rates he originally outlined back in April. It's unclear at this point which countries may be hit with the highest tariff rates, but they do have another 5 days to strike a deal. And Trump is a deal maker, so there is probably still room for negotiation. Trump has really tried to stress that these deals should be simple, that they should not be complex. But the reality is that these deals have these massive long-term implications for economies, and these countries don't want to be rushed into something that could lead to years, if not decades, of negative consequences.
Oh, 5 days, as you say. Given the anxiety on the side of these trading partners, and on the other side, Mr. Trump's need to make these deals and to come across as a good negotiator, any signs of who might get that deal within the next 5 days?
Well, Trump told reporters on Thursday that there are a couple of other deals in the offing, although he didn't specify with which countries. But we do know that South Korea's trade minister is going to be meeting with the U.S. trade representative in Washington this weekend. He is expected to put forward a new offer. The EU is reportedly closing in on a framework of a deal with the U.S., which would see the bloc permanently straddled with that 10% universal tariff. The president said earlier this week that the U.S. was nearing a deal with India, which would open the Indian market more to U.S. companies. Indonesia, you mentioned that $34 billion business MOU with U.S. companies that is expected to be signed next week. So we could see more deals before that July 9th deadline, a deadline, by the way, that President Trump says is not going to be extended. One thing we're also tracking is how China reacts to these deals, because it is not happy with that provision in the Vietnam deal, which includes a 40% tariff on trans shipping, so goods that originate in another country but are then shipped to the U.S. via Vietnam. China has been using this workaround to avoid tariffs from Trump's first term in office for years now, and it's a model that could be replicated in other deals with Asian nations.
Thanks, Toni Waterman there live from Washington, D.C.